Hello, everybody. Dr. Ben Edwards here. Welcome to another episode of You're the Cure. We're going to have a little bit of a breath of fresh air talking ag today. It's interesting, the MAHA, Make America Healthy Again movement, Bobby Kennedy and all these guys. There's such a connection between the medical industry and the agricultural industry. And it's interesting how young doctors get trained up in this system and these institutions that teach a certain way, a certain method, a certain ideology, really. But same with agriculture, if you go to school for it, these institutions of higher learning educate a certain way. And then there's some thinkers outside the box. And we've got one of those today. RN Hopper's joining us on the podcast, and I'm excited to have RN here. We're talking No-Till Texas. There's a big conference coming up in February we'll talk about. But guys, before we get into the show, I want to remind you, we haven't had an agricultural type topic in a long time, but we've got some good shows. You can go back on the website, veritaswellnessmember.com, go to resources, podcast, and then there's a subject bar you can click in the whole menu. A topic is what it's called. And the agriculture topic, I'm just looking at it right now. We've had Gabe Brown. Dirt to Soil was the book that I read of his. Jeremy Brown, a local farmer, organic guy, mostly cotton. Rich Smith, Chad Wall, those are some local guys. But just some cool podcasts there. I encourage you to go check out the ag, because there is such a connection. Obviously, you are what you eat. Really, it's you are what you can digest and absorb. But really, even more than that, it's you are what your farmer produced, and the soil that produced that thing that you consume, that your gut bacteria need to break down to absorb. And there's bacteria in the soil that's got to release those nutrients from the soil and the rock and the sand and the pebbles and all that into the product. So anyways, there's this intimate connection, and we can't really untangle that. So we like to support farmers who are trying to do things a little more back to, or look into the original engineer of this whole thing. We rely on God's amazing design of the body. That's honestly what we're doing at Veritas Wellness and Veritas Medical, is we're just trying to help, get stuff out of the body that God didn't intend to be there, get stuff into the body he did intend to be there, and sit back and leave it alone. Let it function like it's designed to function. It's kind of simple, actually, but that whole philosophy is based on there's a creator, not we came out of nothing from pond scum. There's a design, there's a stewardship component. So in the human body, that's what we believe. And I think that's what RN Hopper believes with the soil and the land and the stewardship of that land. RN, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us today.
It's good to be here, Dr. Ben. I'm very excited. We're excited about the conference coming up that you mentioned, and I'm excited about having a little discussion today.
Yes, sir. Me too. Well, let's go ahead and mention that no-till, and at no-tilltexas.com, and there's a hyphen in between the no and the till, but no-tilltexas.com. There's a soil health symposium February 11th and 12th, and you can go on the website, learn more about it. You can register there. Going to be a number of speakers. I'm honored to be one of them. So we can talk about that now, RN, but I definitely want the audience to hear your story of how'd you get from wherever you were at to where you're at now, and where do you see this thing going? What are we going to talk about at the conference? What's the point of this no-till organization? So let's just hear your testimony.
Well, as you said, my name's RN Hopper. I live northeast of Petersburg, Texas. We farm between Petersburg and Floydada, mostly in Floyd County. I'm 47 years old. You talked about being trained or educated. I did get a degree in agronomy from Texas Tech University. I graduated from there in the year 2000 and came back to the farm. I worked for my dad for 4 years, and then I had the opportunity to rent a farm and start from there. Anyway, I guess when we grew up, our farming practices were very conventional. Uh, my dad was always a fairly progressive farmer, a good farmer, but we did a lot of tillage, used a lot of chemicals, and on and on. When I went to school and studied plant and soil science, at that time there was not a lot of holistic thinking around uh, fertility and nutrient cycling and things like that. They almost taught soils as if it were a chemistry set. And so I kind of approached farming from that mindset early. We want to grow this, we need this, this, and this, and we put all these inputs together and all these nutrients, and hopefully we come out with a strong outcome. And that's not really the way that agriculture works. The soil food web is very complex, and in many ways it resembles our own um, human biome, and the plant microbiome and the root system is almost like an inverted digestive system. And so just like what you mentioned earlier, that you are what you eat, or you are what you can metabolize.
Hmm.
uh, it's very much the same with the soil food web. And I've come to the realization over the years, both personally with my own health and with the health of our farmland, that when it comes to the human body, if it's not a nutrient, if it's some type of medicine that is not a nutrient, uh, it will come with a cost, and
Hmm.
some of those costs are worth paying. When I was a kid, I had pneumonia and I took antibiotics, and it could have saved my life.
Hmm.
Uh, and I'm very I'm very I'm not opposed to taking medicine or antibiotics, but the way that we approach things today, and our overuse of antibiotics, everything that we do, um, it creates as many problems as it solves, and so it's kind of an endless treadmill. When I started farming on my own in 2004, I didn't have a lot of equipment, and so as we I had to pay my dad custom rates for everything that he did on those farms, or that we used his equipment for. And so that was really my first interest in no-till, is trying to save money and cut cost. I didn't really see our agricultural farms as agricultural ecosystems.
Hmm.
I saw the soul is just a blank template, and you put in what you want and take out what you don't, and that's the way it works. And so we did that for several years. We kind of started down a path of less tillage and this and that, but we were maybe doing the right things for maybe not so much the right reasons. And it wasn't until 2008, when I went to a No Till on the Plains conference, and that I began to realize that this was much, much bigger. And these are living, breathing agroecosystems, and everything that we put has an effect. And when we add fertilizer, when we add pesticides, herbicides, and as I said with the medicine, I'm not an organic farmer, uh, but we try to be judicious with our use of pesticides, because they come with consequences.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and maybe before we get deeper into that, for our audience that's not agriculture minded at all, we probably need to define tillage, no tillage, versus organic. Even I think people probably know what organic is, but kind of set the stage a little bit with what's tillage, and maybe even historically, kind of the how modern farming techniques, because that word gets used a lot. These modern farming techniques, but maybe give some of that historical perspective too. But let's start with tillage. What's that even mean?
Tillage is any kind of mechanical disturbance of the soil. Um, so technically, even seeding is some disturbance, although it doesn't typically go below 2 inches, and not very close together. You see people that plant in patterns. Uh, it might be a cereal grain and they plant it on 10-inch centers or on up to 30-inch and 40-inch centers on cotton or corn or whatever. But mainly when people talk about tillage, they're talking about a lot heavier mechanical disturbance, sweeps or discs that plow deep into the ground.
Mhm.
And the problem with this is it's very hard on the creatures that live there, as you can
Mhm.
imagine,
Mhm.
and and even the ones that you don't necessarily think about. And so, like, the biggest problem with tillage is that it's hard on fungal hyphae,
Mhm.
and the fungus are very important in fixing stable organic carbon in the soil. They have the ability to break down very complex um, things like lignin and whatnot over time. But if they're constantly using all the carbon in the system to repair their hyphae, which think of their hyphae as like a root system, except much, much finer. And so, like, fungal hyphae could grow through rock or granite. They can grow through your body,
Mhm.
although that's not great. But when you have a fungal infection, athlete's foot or whatever,
Mhm.
those hyphae can grow through your body.
Yeah.
And, so anyway, as you cut those in the soil, and they're using all the carbon and their energy to repair themselves, they they they're very unable to fix stable organic carbon. Other things too, as far as putting a lot of oxygen in the soil at once, and flaring that microbial activity, and just flashing the fire with gasoline, things like that. Uh, the other problem with tillage is, have you ever seen a day in Lubbock where you see the dirt blowing?
Oh, from time to time, like my last podcast, I'm pretty sure it was brown outside.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah.
And we don't like those brown days. And the soil is a very, very precious resource, and uh, topsoil in particular. And when as that blows away and is displaced, it's it's a sign that we're doing something wrong.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, also let's talk about water conservation. Those hyphae, that little microscopic root system in there breaking through that soil, and what's that do in terms of soil consistency and ability to retain water?
Um, well, obviously, or the higher the organic carbon is, the soil organic matter, the more water holding capacity that you have. But you know, the, the hyphae can even interact with plant roots, and
Mm.
and they get carbon from the plant, and then they bring nutrients to the plant from vast distances. They can grow into the roots and do a lot of things. Um, a lot of times we think of these soil health things, and we talk about the fungal component of soils. We talk about microbial um, portion of soils, and all these things are important. But like a soil food web is so complicated that we probably are not even aware of 2% of the organisms in the web,
Mhm.
and so it's very nebulous. There's a
Mm.
lot of people that have done work, and they try to identify more and more and see what's where. But suffice it to say that we could spend a lifetime studying it and never understand it all. And quite honestly, you didn't hear a lot about the human microbiome.
Mhm.
I've been told that a third of our biomass is microbial,
Yeah.
and that blows my mind.
Yeah.
Eh,
Yeah. I think the first study I could find on that had the word microbiome in it in regards to human was around 2002, the year I graduated from medical school. And it was just a couple articles. And there's, of course, been an exponential increase in that over the last 20, 25 years. So you're right, it's pretty brand new, and our understanding on the human side, I think, is about the same, probably 2% of what these guys are doing. And they're doing some amazing stuff in the gut, not just helping to break the food down. And these bacteria in the gut produce dozens and dozens and dozens of enzymes that humans can't produce. And the enzymes break down the food. I talk about all the time, 94 strains of gut bacteria that break down gluten. And that's it we know of, these species. So, I mean, how many species are there? When they did the Human Genome Project, because they thought humans were going to have, 100,000 genes, because a fruit fly only has, 23,000 or something. And it turns out we have about the same amount of genes as a fruit fly, but the total genetic material they found during that Human Genome Project, it was like 90% of the DNA they found wasn't human DNA inside human beings. And it was all these microbes, mostly bacteria, but some fungi and parasites and viruses and other things. So, yeah, it's an intricate, vast web of a symbiotic petri dish in us. We have a microbiome in our nose, our sinuses, our ears, our skin, the air around us, our gut, obviously, vaginal and rectal. I mean, everywhere we have a unique microbiome that's doing so many beneficial things for us. And guys, if you want to go back, you can find Dr. Natasha McBride, Gut and Psychology Syndrome. We take a deeper dive into this there. But so back to the soil. If you originally started because you're trying to cut costs, not pay your dad so much custom farm fee to get your field ready. So initially you were looking at it for cost savings, but as you started to learn more, why would a farmer maybe want to consider doing this now? What have you learned beyond just the cost savings?
Well, you have to realize that in 2000 times, we grew up primarily growing cotton, and when I was a kid, we uh, we had more irrigation capacity, and when I was really young, things were allotted. The government told you grow so much this, you lay out so much of this, on and on and on. Well, by the time I was in high school, they had come out with what was called the Freedom to Farm Act. That was 1995. Interestingly, that's about the time that Roundup Ready uh, technology really took off in cotton, at least. And so there was just this system that kind of grew up around that, um, that was predominant for the next 20 years, and didn't really end until probably 2014ish, when we started seeing a lot of glyphosate resistant weeds, on and on and on. But as we in 2000, the price of cotton was very, very low. There were there's kind of a safety net on cotton called a government loan, and based on the quality, the government will loan you, X amount against, what you grow, if you don't want to sell it, and you can put it in storage. And to make a long story short, um, in the years between 2000 and 2010, cotton got really high in 2010. There were very few times that cotton was worth a whole lot more than the loan value. So I mean, prices were very, very depressed. We weren't really making a lot of money growing cotton, and so we started doing other things. We started going to the North Plains and harvesting cotton for other people. We started growing more wheat, and running stocker calves on that wheat. Buy them at 500 pounds, sell them at 750, 800 pounds, um, and we started doing a lot of the right things. Rotating, had wheat rotation, had some animal integration, this and that. But those weren't really we weren't really doing it for any soil health reasons. We were just you know, trying to figure out a way to make it through a really hard economic cycle in cotton. Um, in 2007, um, the price of corn exploded with ethanol.
Mm.
And so at the onset of harvest in 2006, corn was like 236 a bushel. And by January of 2007, corn was at $4 a bushel.
Mm.
And Since then it's kind of been anywhere between $4 and as high as $8. And so it was kind of the first of the commodities to really, take a step up to a new price level. And so there were some years between 2007, 8, and 9 that we didn't actually grow an acre of cotton. We grew corn and wheat. But kind of as we did this, we started seeing a lot of changes in the land. Number one, it didn't blow. And so on those windy days, we had enough residue, enough cover that, things weren't moving around. And then we noticed that our structure was getting a lot better, our water infiltration was getting a lot better. We noticed that we were, you know, not needing near as much irrigation in this production system. And so, all of that kind of happened. And then, going to the no-till conference in Salina, Kansas, the No-Till on the Plains conference that I talked about, that was really the year that, made me understand, what was happening, what we were doing. And so between 2008 and 2014, we really worked hard to expand our rotation, bring in more crops, this and this, and then in 2014 we started having little field days at the barn, and we had one in 2014, and then um, we would do the same presentation 2 days in a row, and we did that for 4 years, and then uh, February of 2018 was the first time that we had, a big conference in Lubbock, and what we were really trying to do was just increase awareness. Um, most people want to do the right thing. They want to do what's best for their land, for their families, for their communities, for themselves. Unfortunately, most of us don't always know what the right thing is, and or why it would be important. And so, these conferences are about that. So there's a spectrum of soil health, just like there's a spectrum of human health, and everybody has a place on that spectrum. Some people might be, far over here, and other people might be on the brighter side of that spectrum. But it's been my experience, whether you're talking about soil health, human health, whatever, when you can show people that that spectrum does indeed exist, and that they do indeed have a point on it, their
Mhm.
natural inclination is to want to move further and further to the brighter end of that spectrum.
Mhm.
It's hard to do when you don't know the spectrum exists, but once you realize that it does, um, it's just kind of our natural inclination to want to move that way. And it's somebody asked me the other day, do you ever get frustrated that people don't adopt better soil health practices? And I really don't. It doesn't frustrate me, because I believe that once people really understand the importance of soil health, I think if I'm frustrated about anything, it's that, we haven't shown people that these are living agroecosystems, and they've got
Mhm.
to be cared for as such. Um, if you go to a doctor, and he diagnoses all the many multiple things that you have wrong with you, you're likely going to leave with a lot of pills.
Mhm.
And if you question doctors about that, a lot of them say, well, yeah, we know all this stuff about diet and whatnot, which most of them don't.
Mhm.
But we don't want to waste our breath telling people, because they're not going to make the changes anyway. I just don't believe that. I believe that if people feel bad enough, change is hard. But when the reality you're living in becomes more painful than the prospect of change, you'll change.
Yep, 100%. I agree with that. And that's why we push education, education, education so much, because it pains me to see somebody because they didn't know, lack of knowledge, and these systems we've been trained up in, this medical system, people just don't know that these diseases are epigenetic, not all genetic. The genes are there, but things outside the genes turn these genes on and off, and it's diet and lifestyle related. But people don't know that. So once they know, once they're educated, yeah, let's do something. Let's start moving on this spectrum. So I'm 100% in agreement with you. But it seemed like there's challenges in the farming. Well, it's the same as medical. It's a system. I mean, and I don't know if you want to get into that and the politics of all that, but man, it's a tough system. I mean,
It's
just
a
the pricing deal.
it's a broken system. Our medical industry is broken. Our health in the country is broken. You mentioned RFK Jr. and I think that's one of the things that I'm the most excited about. I think that he genuinely wants to make meaningful change in our food system, and what they say about the number of things that are allowed to be put in processed food in Europe at 7 or 800 things, and over here at 4 or 5 thousand. All that's true, and it's because the standard is different in Europe. In Europe, if you're going to put it in food, you have to prove that it's not harmful for human consumption. In the United States, the burden is much less. You can use something until it's proven to be harmful,
Mhm.
and so many of those things are never proven to be harmful. It's funny, who does the research and kind of how the money goes, but um, for 20 years and really longer, my whole life, all I've heard is that the future belongs to consolidation, and we've seen massive consolidation in agriculture, in animal feeding, in medicine, and none of that has brought better outcomes. And unless and until we can conceive a better, brighter future that is based on deconsolidation, I think we're going to continue to have problems.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we saw that during COVID. So many of these independent doctors have been gobbled up into the hospital systems. And there's, just a certain number of really big hospital systems. And, I don't need to call any of them out right now, but a lot got taken to court because these doctors were handcuffed. They had to follow the protocol of the system they were in because that system's their paycheck. And I hate to say that, but it was clear. And I've had a lot of doctors tell me that once they kind of opened their eyes and woke up that you can actually treat COVID early. We don't have to just sit around and isolate and wait for a vaccine to come out. They weren't allowed to. Literally, their upper level doctors and admins were saying, no, you can't do it. Even though the patients were begging and the families were begging enough to take them to court to try to force the issue. And a lot of times, actually, the court, ruled in favor of that family. And I don't want to get off into all that, but just to say when you consolidate and now you're in these big institutional settings, power and money come into play, and the little man and the customer, the consumer, the patient, they kind of they're not the priority anymore. I'll say that.
How, you know, if you don't mind taking me through a brief history, um, how many years in undergrad, how many years in medical school, how many years as a resident, and then how many years did you practice before you started?
Yeah. So undergrad, 4 years, like pretty much everybody. Medical school is another 4 years, and then my residency, which that's where it varies depending on what specialty you pick. And I picked family practice because I want to be in a small town and kind of do it all. So that was a 3 years on after medical school, 3 year residency. And then I was in practice for about 7 years of conventional medicine in Garza County. And if someone chooses a more specialized residency, you can spend 4, 5, 6, 7, even up to 8 years if you really subspecialize some of the surgical subspecialties and stuff. So, I mean, a doctor can come out with a lot of debt and a lot of time under his belt that he, and kind of get handcuffed to that system. But for me, it was 7 years in private practice until I was introduced to a different way, an alternative way to do things. And that alternative way just happens to get way better results. And at the same time, the conventional way continues to produce such poor results. It's kind of a no brainer. We need to go the alternative.
So you were basically 36 years old when you kind of started down the holistic route?
Basically, yeah.
Hmm. You know, it's hard to it's kind of hard to put this into words, but for years and years, from 2008 until really probably about 2023, um, I worked harder and harder to try to uh, better metrics to judge success. And obviously, as a farmer, one of the easiest metrics used to measure your success is what kind of yields do you make. But there's a lot of metrics. Like what's the long term viability of your system? That's a great one. and
Mhm.
and so you know as I did that, and we tried to come up with friendlier and friendlier systems, ecologically speaking. We were rewarded financially as well. Typically, if something's not ecologically sound over time, it won't be economically sound either. Ecology
Mhm.
and economy are very closely related. They really can't be divorced from each other for any period of time. But ironically, as I worked harder and harder on the farm, um, I neglected my own health more and more. I think a lot of doctors probably do that. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know really anybody that works any more hours than doctors. Um, I have a friend that went to medical school late, and he was in his 40s when he was going through his residency to be
Mhm.
a family practitioner like yourself. And the amount of work that he did during the time of his residency was really, you know, impressive. Uh, but it takes a toll on people. Well, it's the same way on the farm, and a lot of times, the busier we are, the less time we take to take care of ourselves. And so, as time went on, and I got in my mid 40s, um, the consequences of not I didn't even think that my diet was all that unhealthy, but I didn't really understand a lot about cellular metabolism and how things worked. And so I just had a lot of problems, and I took a lot of medicine. And anyway, as I began to make time to learn about some of that stuff, it was life changing, and that's really kind of the theme of this year's No Till conference. You said that you were speaking at the conference, but that was very humble. We're actually building the conference around you, and you're our keynote. You'll be speaking both days, and then doing the workshop the afternoon of the second day, and we're excited about that because all of these things are connected, and it's hard. If there's a lot of farmers that are struggling right now to make ends meet, and a lot of them don't feel very good either
Mhm.
because a lot of them don't take very good care of themselves. And it's not just exclusive to agriculture. I mean, you can take a look around and see that a lot of us in this country are not taking very good care of ourselves. And
Mhm.
and I think just like when we're not the best stewards of our land, it's because of a lack of knowledge. And we need to bring awareness to these things. And when people feel better. Um, it's amazing how much more productive that they can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And the ideas that start to flow and the motivation to make some of those changes. Because when you start talking about changing a farming practice or how you deal with your health, I mean, we're talking generational things and understandings and influences. And to think about changing that and taking a different direction, especially a farm, when your daddy and your granddaddy and everybody and all the neighbors sort of do it a certain way. I mean, that takes energy, motivation, drive. And when you're sick and or just no energy, fatigued and not stewarding your health. So yeah, lots of kind of beneficial side effects of starting to gain knowledge and then walk in it. And it's all interconnected. I mean, as you've laid out well, in medical school, separated the body into all the different parts. Like you said at the beginning, your farm, you looked at it as a kind of a blank slate. You put certain chemical inputs in and take certain things out and spray this and spray that and get your product. And it's all an intellectual mathematical calculation on the chemistry set. And that's the same with pharmaceutical based symptom management. And we can get outcomes, meaning let's decrease your blood sugar number and your blood pressure and your symptom of acid reflux or your migraines. I mean, we can force those things down with pharmaceuticals, but at what cost? same as this chemical input stuff. The cost is decreased longevity, not of just your farm production, but of the human lifespan. And that's what's clear since 1910 when we chose to go pharmaceutical, treat a symptom with the pill. Life expectancy has just gone down and down and down. Disease burden has gone up and up. Health span curve has absolutely cratered in the mid 20s now, is when the average American's health starts to crater, when the health span curve should run along your lifespan curve and drop off at the very end of your life. We're nowhere near that. So there's extreme cost to just dividing the body, making it a chemistry set, using pharmaceuticals to treat all the smoke instead get to the fire. So just an intricate, almost a mirroring in the agricultural world and the medical worlds, the body and the soil. So maybe talk more a little bit if you want to about your health journey, because as far as I know from our previous conversations, you're real knowledgeable now, and you stewarded really well, and you've overcome a lot. And I would call you pretty dang healthy. You're not a patient of ours, but from what you told me, so maybe share a little more of that testimony.
Well, I guess I've always had a lot of joint pain and inflammation, and my feet have always hurt. And by the time I was 35, I really couldn't wear work boots anymore, and I started wearing Rockports because they're so cool. And then they quit making the kind I like to wear, and so I kind of evolved to on cloud sneakers and whatnot. And that's what I was farming out of because my feet hurt so bad, and my lower back. And then as I got into my early my my elbows hurt and my shoulders hurt to the point that I was told that I could probably go get some shots in them and they quit hurting, but I never did. And anyway, things just and then I gained some weight, and I'd always been you know fairly disciplined about my weight, and I would get up to close to 200 pounds, and then I'd lose down to 175, 180 pounds. And then over the course of a couple of years, I'd get back up to 200 pounds. But when I got to be in my early 40s, everything that I'd ever done to lose weight didn't seem to be very successful anymore. And so I just kind of kept going on up to 218. And, uh, and that was a first. I'd never really crossed that 200-pound threshold, much less kept going. And so at 218, I was taking medicine to slow down my heart, like a blood pressure medicine, a beta blocker. I was taking antacids that I'd been taking since I was in high school. I was taking a statin, um, and that's probably about it. And I just felt terrible, all the time. And I was 45 years old, and I was looking at my dad, who at the time was like 77, and I was thinking, I don't see how I'm going to make it another 30 years, not feeling like this. And I just didn't have a whole lot to look forward to. And my brother in law had been studying about, carnivore diets and metabolism and health and this and that. And so got to looking at a lot of things that he was sending me. And I decided that that's what I was going to do. The carnivore diet, as I was in it for 14 days, my elbows and my shoulders stopped hurting, and I stopped taking the acid reflux medicine, and then after the 70 days, you start bringing leafy greens and low starch vegetables back, and on, and adding things back very slowly. As much as anything, and I will say that everyone I know that has done a carnivore diet, they've all said the same thing. They've said, I didn't know that I could feel this good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what was great about it for me. I got to see very quickly that based on what I ate, a lot of my problems could be resolved.
Mm-hmm.
And so, now I don't even know what you would say about the way I eat, but and by no means is it perfect. But I try to avoid processed foods. I try to avoid sugar, um, and I limit carbohydrates, but I wouldn't be what you would call keto or this or that. Just kind of a lot fewer than what I used to. And then also, and probably one of the biggest things is I try to stay away from seed oils,
Mhm.
vegetable oils, including cottonseed oil, which I'm not supposed to say as a cotton farmer, but I
It's a
don't think
great
we should be.
lubricant. It's a lubricant for machinery, just not human machinery, cellular machinery.
Yes. And you're starting to hear a lot more about that. And quite honestly, I can find you videos that'll talk about the health of seed oils, and videos that talk about how bad they are. But the ones that have the most science in them that I listen to the most are the ones that are kind of in the negative camp. But that's another important point. There's just not any there can't be anything that we're not willing to have a discussion about. I know what your feelings about glyphosate and the overuse of glyphosate are. I've used a lot of glyphosate in my lifetime. If there's something wrong with glyphosate, then I want to know about it.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's off the table, and it's hard for me to say a lot of negative things about glyphosate because it kind of fueled our no-till journey and our journey into soil health, and it provided us with a tool to control weeds so we could figure things out. I will
Mhm.
say this, we use a third of the glyphosate that we used to use.
Mhm.
So I mean, we're very much interested in using less and less and less. And if it's as bad as some people think it is, we want to know.
Right.
Um,
Yep. Well, that open-minded and being willing to look and read and research and make changes, but like you said, this spectrum, and we're all on it. I mean, I don't like prescribing prednisone, for instance, steroid. Again, going to outcomes, someone can take a big old steroid shot or take a prednisone oral steroid taper, and their symptoms will be gone by tomorrow, probably. So that outcome, so to speak, of decreased inflammation, feel better, whether that be joints or this particular case yesterday was a rip roaring case of ulcerative colitis to the point of probably needing to be hospitalized or almost. And we're trying to keep her out of there. But my point is, you don't want to be on prednisone forever. And there's lots of unintended negative consequences of doing that, and especially a lot of it, too much of it. And you got to get to the root cause and all that. So, but every individual's on their journey too. So, I kind of look at this as an evolution over time of, I call it the Ben Edwards 1.0, which is just pure pharmaceutical based. I went to med school with the right heart, I believe, want to help people. Go out to Post Texas and did that for 7 years, and thought I was doing 100% the right thing. But again, lack of knowledge. So that was 1.0. 2.0 was, oh, wow, we can use nutraceuticals instead of pharmaceuticals. Use some probiotics, use some digestive enzymes to support the stomach acid production to break that food down better, and other supplements. So the 2.0 version is better on that spectrum. You're maturing, you're learning, you're getting better and getting better outcomes, and more long-term outcomes are better. And then the 3.0 is moving more into the understanding that we're not just physical molecules. We're a spirit being housed in the flesh, but this spiritual, this invisible, this quantum realm that we talked about last week on the show, our thoughts, really our heart beliefs, actually impact the molecules that make up those stomach acid pumps. So the 3.0 is really getting deeper into that understanding of, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, is actually true. And then 4.0 we'll talk about more maybe next week. It's a spectrum. We're on our journey. I'm on my journey. Patients are on their journey. Farmers are on their journey. So yeah, I'm not a huge glyphosate fan, but there's a way to use less and less and less, and eventually possibly none. But I'm excited for anybody that's open minded to be on the journey, like you said. So, more farmers getting educated on things like y'all do at the conference. That's what I'm all about. And that's why we're having you on the show today. And that's why we're promoting it. We've got a few minutes left, 5 to 10 minutes are in. So, comments on any of that, or any kind of final closing thoughts that you have that you want to share with the audience, on anything?
I guess the most important point is we'll never know everything.
Yeah.
Um, whether it's about on this side of the veil, we will never know everything, and so it is a journey. very much so. I liked when you talked about, 1.0 and 2.0 and 3.0. And as long as you live, you'll just keep going down that
Mm,
road. And
mhm.
it's an humbling thing. We make mistakes, and sometimes we have to do things that we don't really want to do to quickly address those mistakes. And they might not be, mistakes might not be the right word, but you talked about the prednisone. You take enough prednisone, it'll kill you,
Yeah,
deader than a hammer.
yeah.
But it can also do miraculous things. And when you've maneuvered yourself to a spot, when your ulcerative colitis is out of control, especially for older people, and then they're getting dehydrated, and you that's where you absorb most of the water is through your colon,
Mm,
correct?
yeah.
And when it's inflamed and swollen, you're not able to hydrate, and the risk of dehydration is very, very great. And that can kill you too. And
Mhm.
so, steroids in that case to get that calmed down, and then look for a longer term solution. It's very good. And I wish that we knew everything. I really don't. Um, but if you had more knowledge, maybe you could get around the prednisone. But
Yeah.
you know, in a pinch, it'll do.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where we're going. I think the Lord's trying to take us, and as the body, we're learning more. Knowledge is increasing, understanding, wisdom, but you got to seek it. Seek the kingdom first, and we get distracted seeking certain temporary symptom relief, or seeking financial, or seeking fame and fortune, or whatever. We're human beings, and we can get distracted and tempted to go be our own provision, own protection, that orphan mindset. I mean, there's lots of ways to get distracted, but keeping that kingdom first. And I believe God's trying to show us a kingdom way to do agriculture, a kingdom way to do medicine, a kingdom way to do finances, a kingdom way to do everything. So I
There's no
think that,
doubt. And it's amazing, how our preconceptions can get in the way of that. Um, I think to the Paul Harvey interview. I've said this before. It's very flattering. God made a farmer on the eighth day, and was in the
mm,
Super Bowl ads, and it was on and on. And the public perception of farmers, I think is pretty positive. Um, but at the same time, as honored as I am by, the Paul Harvey sentiments, they're unfortunately not true, because God didn't make a farmer on the eighth day. He made a gardener on the sixth day. And
mhm,
you know, we've fallen pretty far from what we were created to be. But I do have hope that, if we seek after him and his ways, that even in this fallen world, we can become a few steps closer to the gardeners that and the stewards that we were intended to be, whether it be of the land, of our families, of our jobs, whatever resources that we're blessed with, and tasked with stewarding, that we can do the best job possible with that. And that's really what the Soul Health Symposium is about. It's not about, you know, telling people what they're doing wrong. It's about looking at where we are and what we can do better. And we don't have all the answers, and we don't know everything. But
mhm.
but we do know that we've got a lot better chance to find those answers together. We're excited about the conference on February 11th and 12th. We're excited about an open and honest discussion about the strengths and the weaknesses in our industries, in our agricultural industries, in our health industries, and in all of these things.
Well, I'm honored to be a part of it. I tell people all the time, if everybody gets well and healthy, no need for a doctor, I might go be a farmer. I'd like, I think I'd like to do that, but farming's a hard business. I know that. I've got a lot of farmers that are patients, and they're pretty stressed out. RN, we got to wrap it up, but on the conference, maybe, obviously farmers are the intended audience, I guess, but what about general public, people listening to this podcast that live in the Lubbock area, just not farmers? tell, who do you want to show up to this thing?
Anybody that eats.
Mm,
And so, if you have an interest in healthier living and better stewardship, you should come to the conference. The conference is at the Overton this year. We have traditionally um, moved between Lubbock and Amarillo. So 1 year in Lubbock, next in Amarillo, and we're back in Lubbock this year. We're at the Overton. Uh, you can register right there for $60, and that includes meals both days. And we will have registration at the door, but just makes things go a little smoother if we have people pre-registered.
yeah. Okay, guys. So go check it out. No-till-texas.com. And there's a hyphen between the no and the till. No hyphen till, T-I-L-L, texas.com. And you'll see the Soil Health Symposium, 7th Annual Soil Health Symposium on there. You can register, hotel reservations on there. The list of speakers is on there. The schedule's on there. So go check that out. RN, thank you for all you do. I know it's hard work putting a conference together like this. It's hard work farming. It's hard talking about some things too. So congratulations for doing some hard things to benefit the people and benefit the kingdom, benefit the soil, and just benefit the body of Christ. Thank you for joining us today. It's been a great show. Appreciate you coming on.
Yes, and thanks for all you do.
You bet. All right, everybody. That's RN Hopper, and this will be on every podcast platform, YouTube, our website, veritaswellnessmember.com under resource page podcast. One more thing I was supposed to promote, and I forgot at the top of the show. Actually, a conference I'll be speaking at in May, but Joel Salatin is going to be one of the keynotes. Seeking Whole Health. That's seekingwholehealth.com. That's going to be up in Ohio. But you can go to that website, Wooster, Ohio. Joe Salatan and myself, and I think a couple other speakers. But anyway, since that's far away, we're promoting it now, and it's going to be, I think it's the first week of May. All right, everybody. We'll be back next week with another show. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dr. Ben Edwards. You're the cure.